He is simply put one of the greatest defensive football players ever to live. That's both a college football Hall of Famer and a pro football Hall of Famer. And his story will be told coming up here by NFL Films and NFL Network as part of A Football Life premiering tomorrow. Ronnie Lott joining us. Ronnie, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Doing pretty good. Yourself?
I'm doing great, man. I appreciate you dropping on by. And this is probably going to be a question that you get asked a lot, but I'd love to know the answer to it. Do you think it would have been hard for you to play today with the current rules for defensive players?
No. And the reason why, and it's just pretty simple, my mother would have been very angry at me to lose $50,000 for a fine. So that's one. And then two, Barry Bonds, who is a good friend of mine, I asked him, I said, tell me about the strike zone when that changed and you were playing. And he goes, Ronnie, what are you talking about? He goes, you adjust, you learn, you figure it out. And the point is that that's what great players do. They figure it out and you get better and you find a way to play within the rules, and you find a way to be able to do your job within the rules. And as we've seen over the last couple of years, you're starting to see guys trying to figure it out. You see guys trying to find ways to do it. And then you see other guys that don't do it, and they don't try to figure it out. And so, to me, that's really unacceptable, because if you really want to be in the NFL and you really believe you're a great player, you're constantly improving, you're constantly trying to get better, and you're constantly trying to find ways to not hurt your team.
You were an amazing player in high school on both sides of the football, and when you were recruited to USC, I read a story that said that John Robinson had to decide between you and Marcus Allen, offense or defense, and ultimately said, Ronnie, we want you on defense. Have you ever felt or wondered what your life would have been like had you not switched to defense at USC?
No, never. Never thought about it. And the reason why is I love what I did, and I love being able to play the game the way I was able to play the game. And the other thing, too, is that, I know Marcus. He's my brother. I know Joe. He's my other brother. And what I mean by Joe Montana, that side of the ball is different. And that side of the ball has certain things that comes with it that I don't know if I have the capability of doing what they do on the offensive side. And so there are things that they live with, and there are things that I live with that I feel really comfortable with. And so, yeah, it's more than just how you play. To me, it's a kind of a spirit. It's a way that you got to think. It's a way that you got to attack. It's a way that you got to find ways to think of what the defense is doing. So of what the offense is doing. So there's so many things that are really intuitive to how I feel about the things that I think about.
Ronnie Lott joins us as part of NFL Network's A Football Life series. His career and life will be spotlighted, which I cannot wait for. Premieres tomorrow. We have some future Hall of Famers or perennial Pro Bowlers that are coming to the end of perhaps their tenure with their teams. Maybe Tom Brady, maybe Eli Manning, maybe Phillip Rivers. Maybe those guys are playing in different uniforms next year. You played a decade in San Francisco and then 2 years with the Raiders and then 2 years with the Jets. If you were to talk to those guys and they asked you, how'd you feel about leaving the only team that you knew and playing for a different team later in your career, what would you tell them?
It's funny. It's a really interesting thing that you're asking, and the reason why, to me, I've always had this mantra of life of exhaust every moment, exhaust life, and give it your all. And so, for me, I always thought that was the idea about exhausting everything. Play as long as you can. No matter no matter what team you play for, just exhaust it. And now looking and reflecting back, there are things that I think about that when I think about the 49ers and I think about what we were trying to accomplish and what we were doing, you know, I've seen the Warriors and watching the Warriors break up here and watching some of the things that they're struggling with. And when you start to have people leave and things go in different directions, it's really challenging. And to me, so sometimes to me, when I think about it, sometimes I sit there and say, maybe winning is more important than exhausting life. And so, I've debated about that in my head, but I've always felt like I wanted to exhaust life and give everything I can to the respect of sport because I didn't want to have any regrets in my life.
So, in other words, you think about perhaps taking less to stay with the Niners in 91?
Yeah, and the reason I say that is that sometimes when I contemplate on it, it's really around the fact that you could have stayed a part of the family and you could have done – we might have won another championship. And so those things you think about at the same time, to me, again, even when I just said it, exhausting life and giving your all and knowing that you don't have any regrets, especially knowing that you don't have any regrets is a really interesting thing to me. And so when I look back at football, I know that I left everything on the field. I gave everything I could, and yet I could have, possibly thought about that moment of saying, maybe I might have, if I had stayed, what would that have been like?
Interesting. Ronnie Lott joins us this morning here on the show. Is it true, the anecdote, that you guys were on the bus heading to the Super Bowl at Pontiac, Michigan, your first Super Bowl after the 81 season, and that Joe Montana wanted to play Kenny Loggins' This Is It on loop to get you guys fired up?
Yeah.
Did it get you fired up?
No, look, and Kenny Loggins at that time, and that song was, really around the moment of this is it, and you had those moments, but in our case, because of the bus, of the bus being late. I mean, there were so many things that went wrong that morning that, I remember sitting there going, man, I can't believe it. We're in Pontiac. Our bus is late. We're not going to make the game. We're going to have, the whole day is going to be ruined. So, yeah, he wanted to do that, but there were a lot of things that went wrong during that day that made that day a little challenging.
So how'd you refocus to get into the Super Bowl mindset? That was the first time as a young player, I'm sure, that you had ever experienced anything close to that type of stage, and you were a young team in general.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I thought that the great thing about Bill was I think Bill drafted guys that had been in those kind of circumstances, meaning, Carlton Williamson, Eric Wright in Missouri, all these guys had been in bowl games. All of them had played, for something before they had played for the Super Bowl. So they were accustomed to playing for something. And I had played. I remember walking in to the Super Bowl going, man, wait a minute. This is what? It's only 50,000 fans at this dome? You got to be kidding me. We played in front of 100,000 people at the Rose Bowl. So, you start to kind of figure out how to, find ways to, to deal with the I guess the aura and the enormity of the game. And so that's kind of how I rationalize it, and that's kind of how I got there. But, yeah, we all kind of go through those type of things, and I think a lot of it is due to the fact that, if you think of Joe Montana and you think of all those guys that played on that 81 team, we had all been in big games. We've all been in situations where we had, found ourselves, trying to figure out how to make it work. And so I think that was just another moment in our lives where we all tried to figure it out.
Ronnie Lott has lived one of the most interesting football lives ever. I can't wait until tomorrow's A Football Life from the NFL Network and NFL Films on your life and career from high school to USC through the Niners dynasty and on. It's going to be premiering tomorrow. Check it out. The series is just amazing, no matter when they do it, how they do it, and I'm sure your episode's going to be awesome. This was a real thrill for me, Ronnie. You're one of my favorite players to have watched growing up, and I really appreciate the time today, man. This was a lot of fun. I can't wait for your episode to drop tomorrow.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate it as well, and thank you for your time, and more importantly, man, have a great Halloween.
You too. Ronnie Lott joining us, Pro Football Hall of Famer, College Football Hall of Famer, A Football Life tomorrow on the NFL Network.